Saw dudes, with Yareli Prime now available, it's time to dive into one of the most accessible yet devastating frames to hit Warframe. Unlike some of the high investment Prime Warframes out there, Yareli Prime is easy to get into. Whether you're gliding across the battlefield with Marilina or harnessing the full force of the ocean with her devastating abilities, Yareli Prime brings fluid, fast, and fierce gameplay without the need for massive investment. She's strong and versatile, and ready to carve through Steel Path missions with anime girl swagger. Ride the waves and watch the enemies drown trying. Let's get started. Before covering the builds, let's go over Yareli's abilities. If you already know how her abilities work, please skip to the build section. Yareli's passive is her critical flow buff. Whenever Yareli moves for at least 1.5 seconds, she gains the buff, which increases critical chance on her secondary weapon by 200%. Critical flow lasts until Yareli stops moving for 1 second. Critical flow additively stacks with other pistol critical chance mods to increase this secondary weapon's base critical chance stat. The condition of movement to activate and sustain critical flow involves the player's input of movement keys, falling from heights, or performing certain maneuvers such as bullet jumping, aim gliding, and wall latching. Object-induced movement, such as riding an elevator, does not trigger Yareli's passive. Marilina's innate K-drive drifting momentum helps activate and maintain Yareli's passive. Yareli's first ability is Sea Snares. Casting the ability costs 25 energy and causes Yareli to fling out a cluster of 5 water globules that spread apart in front of her, then settle and float in place 5 meters away. If enemies are within 30 meters and in line of sight, globules travel at 12.8 meters per second to home in on individual targets. Up to 15 globules can exist at once. New casts will replace the oldest ones. Each globule lasts 20 seconds and acts as a proximity trap with a 10-meter detection radius. Upon spotting an enemy within line of sight, the globule speeds towards it and splashes, enveloping the target in aerial cryostasis for 12 seconds. The enemy takes 250 cold damage per second, increasing by 125 cold damage per second elapsed, and suffers plus 100% damage vulnerability. Globules without targets float horizontally, bouncing off walls before settling. If a target dies mid-flight, the globule stops and waits for another enemy. Globules prioritize unique targets per cast, but can target already unensnared enemies from previous casts. They will not retarget enemies already affected by sea snares. Overguarded enemies can still be targeted and take full damage and debuffs, but they are not immobilized. Marilina is Yareli's second ability. Casting the ability causes Yareli to expend 25 energy to summon her faithful aquatic creature from the watery depths and ride aboard Marilina after it emerges. Upon activation, the board is invulnerable for 4 seconds. During this time, all incoming damage it takes is added to its total health. While riding Marilina, Yareli switches her combat and movement controls to K-drive controls. Aboard her transport, Yareli unholsters and only wields her equipped secondary weapon, becoming immune to ragdoll and resisting stagger and knockdown effects from most sources. Yareli can manually dismount from Marilina at 0 energy cost by pressing the ability key again, pressing and holding the quick melee attack key, or holding and releasing the interact key to despawn it and switch back to normal Warframe controls. Yareli is invulnerable for 4 seconds after summoning Marilina, and is invulnerable for an additional 1.5 seconds when dismounting manually or on Marilina's destruction. Marilina has a base health pool of 7,500 health and 50 armor that protects Yareli by redirecting 90% of all incoming damage from Yareli to Marilina's health. The ability lasts indefinitely until its health pool fully depletes or Yareli dismounts or falls out of bounds. Upon destruction, Marilina prevents the damage from the last lethal hit from spilling over into Yareli's hit points. Marilina's health pool is not affected by damage reduction from abilities and mods such as Total Eclipse and Adaptation. However, adaptation stacks can still be accumulated while riding Marilina. Marilina benefits from armor provided by Azure Archon shards, but not from other sources. Marilina cannot be healed by conventional means, such as picking up health orbs or triggering arcane enhancement effects. Also, Marilina gradually loses a percentage of health per second when Yareli is within an ability nullifying sphere created by special enemies such as the Nullifier Crewman. Yareli's third ability is Aqua Blades, where she uses 75 energy to twirl out a swirling whirlwind of 3 razor-sharp Aqua Blades that form a protective ring around her for 45 seconds. Aqua Blades rapidly revolve clockwise around Yareli, striking all enemies within a radius of 5 meters in an interval of 3 consecutive hits within half a second. Enemies that receive all 3 hits are immune to further hits from Aqua Blades for 0.5 seconds. Each hit inflicts 750 slash damage with a 100% status chance and stagger. At max ability rank, if an enemy receives a trio of hits by Aqua Blades, it receives a total of 2250 slash damage with 3 slash procs on individual timers, dealing a total of 4725 cinematic damage over 6 seconds. Cinematic damage is a hidden, unique damage type that has no damage modifier against any faction. This damage type applies to health, shield, and overguard, and bypasses armor's damage reduction. It is applied as the stats effect of slash damage. Cinematic damage is similar to true damage, though the latter also bypasses shields. Cinematic damage bypasses damage reduction from armor, but does not bypass damage reduction provided by sources that are not armor. Aqua Blades do not require line of sight between Yareli and enemies in range. The Ring of Blades phases through all terrain obstacles. Riptide is Yareli's final ability. The ability costs 100 energy to activate and causes Yareli to conjure forth a water cyclone within 40 meters at the location on her aiming reticle. It pulls in enemies within a 15-meter line of sight detection radius, ragdolling and spiraling them into a liquid sphere that lasts 10 seconds. The suction radius starts wide and shrinks to 5 meters over 2 seconds. While trapped, enemies take 500 cold damage every 0.45 seconds. The ability key can be manually detonated by pressing the key again, or will auto-burst on expiry. The burst deals knockdown and a base 2500 cold damage boosted by plus 50% per surviving enemy still inside the cyclone and affected by ability strength. Only enemies caught in the sphere are launched by the burst. Enemies outside the sphere within 15 meters will still take the burst damage and knockdown. Holding the ability key initiates an automatic two-phase cast within a 1.75 second window, dealing up to 4 cold ticks before detonation. Casting speed affects tick rate, increasing cold damage application speed for both tap and hold casts. Now let's cover the game loop. In general, you want to drown enemies before killing them, which makes things easier naturally. First, cast Marilina to get a mobility boost and style on enemies. Then cast Aqua Blades for the free damage ring. Before firing on enemies, spam Sea Snares to increase enemy damage vulnerability. This will increase the damage they take and keep them still for easy pickings. If there are too many enemies to deal with at once, cast Riptide to clump them up and use Sea Snares to make them squishier. For helmet setups, focus on keeping buffs rolling or using them to further increase enemy damage vulnerability. Most of the time, you want to focus on applying Sea Snares to all targets and recasting Marilina for the invulnerability window it provides. Then, it's just rinsing and repeating. This Yareli Prime video features 8 unique loadouts with their respective helmet setups and alterations. As usual, I recommend using 3 Omniforma on the frame, 1 in the Aura slot, 1 in the Exila slot, and 1 in the primary modding section. This allows for the best amount of flexibility across builds. The first build is a non-helmet setup and is designed for new players on a budget. All the mods can be found fairly early on in the game, or can be bought from other players for 10 to 15 platinum a pop. This build is also suitable for Steel Path usage, but you would still want to consider using higher tier mods if possible. Growing Power increases ability strength alongside Power Drift and Intensify, increasing the damage vulnerability applied by Sea Snares. Continuity and Constitution increase ability duration for higher Sea Snare duration, improving crowd control and Aqua Blade uptime. Stretch provides our baseline ability range increase and makes it easier for Sea Snare traps to home in on long range enemies. It also increases the vacuum radius for Riptide, making grouping much easier to accomplish. Streamline and Boreal's Hatred increase ability efficiency, allowing for more effective spamming of Yareli's abilities and decreasing the interval between Sea Snares cast from Marilina, thanks to the Loyal Marilina augment. Now is a perfect opportunity to talk about Loyal Marilina. Instead of riding Marilina, the sentient surfboard now autonomously follows Yareli and casts Sea Snares on nearby enemies every 2 seconds, with the cooldown scaling inversely with ability efficiency, down to a minimum of 0.5 seconds at 175% efficiency. With our current setup, we have a cooldown of 1.1 seconds. These Sea Snares inherit all of Yareli's modded stats, even if Yareli has replaced Sea Snares with a helmet ability, which you should absolutely never do. They are really busted. Marilina's Sea Snares are cast 1 by 1, unlike Yareli's standard cast of 5, but their effects stack multiplicatively with her regular Sea Snares, making this an incredibly potent debuff tool. Even though Yareli no longer rides Marilina, she still gets the initial vulnerability on cast, making it a worthwhile investment for quickly recovering from a bad position. Yareli still receives the 90% damage redirection from the ability, but the redirected damage is now independent of Marilina's armor, including armor gained from sources like Azure Archon shards. There is a trade-off, however. Yareli loses her immunity to enemy-induced stagger effects like knockdowns, although she retains immunity to self-inflicted stagger, such as explosive weapons. The second build is essentially the same as the last, but this time it uses the higher tier mods for more advanced players. The core of the build remains the same. Prime Continuity pumps up ability duration more than its non-prime variant, and is necessary to account for the negative duration incurred by fleeting expertise. Umbral Intensify increases ability strength even more for higher damage vulnerability debuffs, and is further compounded upon by the multiplicative scaling of Loyal Marilina. Fleeting Expertise helps max out ability efficiency to 175%, making the Sea Snare cooldown from the Loyal Marilina half a second for constant debuffing. The third build marks the start of the helmet setups. For this build, much of the mods remain the same. However, it is tailored for level cap, or at the very least, more difficult content. The 3 helmet options for this build are Nourish, Zada's Whisper, and Roar. This build drops Fleeting Expertise for Streamline, since we are trying to sustain buff timers and reduce the need to recast abilities. We also sub out Energy Nexus and Constitution for Vigilante Vigor and Fast Deflection, both to reduce shield recharge delay and increase shield recharge rate. While we can cycle through invulnerability gates with Marilina, having a full shield gate offers another layer of survivability. The 2 shield mods allow the shields to be nearly fully restored upon invulnerability gate ending, making Yareli a much more capable frame at level cap. Now, let's quickly cover the helmet options for the build. Nourish is the go-to helmet ability for many due to its ease of use. The energy multiplier effect pairs well with Archon Stretch, which can be activated by a companion with a damaging ability modded for electric damage. The viral damage and application can be helpful, but it does interfere with elemental weighting. Zada's Whisper is a straightforward buff tailored towards headshots thanks to its bullet attractor effect. The buff itself is super straightforward and does not interfere with elemental weighting. Roar is a favorite among those who prefer not to swap out faction bonus mods due to laziness. The damage buff provided by the ability is double dip for damage over time calculations, making it excellent for builds that utilize status damage. All of the buffs mentioned stack extremely well with sea snares, making any weapon incredibly strong. It is recommended to try out each one for yourself to see what best fits your weapon choice. Now we have the ultimate damage vulnerability build using Sentient Wrath as our helmet ability. Sentient Wrath as a subsumed ability only strikes in a frontal cone and does not inflict Tau status effects. However, it stacks multiplicatively with Sea Snares, meaning it adds a third layer of damage vulnerability to the mix. Admittedly, it's a bit stupid, but it's hard to deny how strong it is. Much of the build remains the same. Growing Power provides just a bit more ability strength for all the abilities and allows for harder scaling amongst the 3 provided damage vulnerability debuffs. We now have Prime Flow for the additional energy cap, since spamming Sea Snares and Sentient Wrath with Blind Rage is extremely costly. Speaking of which, Blind Rage makes an appearance, but only because we are able to negate all of the negative ability efficiency with the combo of Boreal's Hatred and Fleeting Expertise. While we do have slightly negative duration, it is not enough to throw the build off in the slightest. Unlike buffs, we are not focused on keeping them active. Sentient Wrath needs to be reapplied to every new crowd and every new enemy. For this build in particular, it's recommended to have a Tau Forge Violet Shard attuned for a mini equilibrium passive. This will make energy strain a much smaller problem. This build and the next two are centered around Surging Blades, an augment that turns Aqua Blades into Yareli's primary damage source. With this mod equipped, Yareli can recast Aqua Blades while the ability is active to launch a single blade that pierces through enemies, dealing damage in a small radius and applying a guaranteed slash status effect. Each time one of the blades hits an enemy, it contributes to a damage pool that accumulates and powers up the thrown blade's damage. This projectile has infinite body punch through. Importantly, the accumulated damage only applies to the thrown blade. The spinning blades around Yareli still deal their normal damage. The throw normally costs 15 energy, modified by ability efficiency, but when riding Marilena, the energy cost drops to 0, letting you spam powerful throws for free. The helmet ability for this build and the other Surging Blades build is Roar, for the double dip damage on slash procs. Viral status should be offloaded to a priming weapon like Yareli Prime, Epitaph Prime, or Compressor Prime. Now let's actually talk about the mods. This is a mecha setup and therefore requires a Kubro with the rest of the set to use optimally. Any will do, but the Huress is especially nice since it will allow Yareli to go invisible with the stock mod. Invisibility can last indefinitely if Yareli only throws blades, so she can cheese through content. Mecha Empowered grants a multiplicative bonus damage multiplier against marked enemies. For slash damage, this bonus is factored in twice, for a 6.25 times damage multiplier. This stacks with the one instance of Sea Snares and Roar for incredible nuking potential. Power Dredge and Blind Rage increase ability strength, with Precision Intensify solely increasing the potency of Roar for a higher universal bane modifier. Mecha Pulse is used to increase the effectiveness of the mecha set. Equilibrium helps pad out the energy economy since Sea Snares will cost 38.75 energy per cast. Archon Stretch increases the range of Sea Snares and Roar. Prime Continuity and Narrow Minded increase the duration of Aqua Blades and Roar for ease of use and reduce energy strain. This build does require you to ride Marilena, so if you're into the anime surfer girl stuff and know how to rip tricks, this is right up your alley. However, if you are not a fan of riding Marilena, then this next build is for you. Build 6 replaces Archon Stretch for Loyal Marilena and Blind Rage for Transient Fortitude. Swapping out Blind Rage makes the build much easier to run and reduces the strain of spamming. Ability duration does take a small hit, but it's not enough to matter much and could be easily rectified with Archon Shards if desired. Loyal Marilena removes the need to ride Marilena and still allows Aqua Blades to be thrown for free, assuming Marilena is alive. This is amazing for retaining the usual mobility that Warframes have and allows for 2 stacking instances of Sea Snares on top of the Mecha Empowered buff and Roar. The last setup is for those of you who like level cap goofiness with Aqua Blades. I know you exist because I exist. Anyway, for this build, Prime Continuity is removed and replaced by Fast Deflection for increased shield gating capabilities. The invulnerability window provided by Loyal Marilena can be abused, allowing for shield gate spamming in higher difficulty content. This build has the lowest duration of all 3 Aqua Blades builds, but that is not a major issue in most content. And again, it could be fixed with Archon Shards if you would like. The final build uses Marilena Guardian, the other augment for Marilena. Loyal Marilena and Marilena Guardian cannot be equipped on the same build. Marilena Guardian causes enemies killed while affected by Sea Snares to heal Marilena and grant increased reload speed and fire rate to secondaries for a duration. Essentially, it cracks them out. As for the helmet ability, Gloom goes over Aqua Blades, which provides a great slowing effect and makes kills easy. It also stays active while riding Marilena, assuming Yareli has enough energy. Combat Discipline is used to proc Arcane Avenger, but this can be swapped out for any aura of your choosing. Preparation is used to get the ball rolling and upon starting the mission, regeneration, allows for an initial cast of Gloom. Prime Continuity increases the duration of all of Yareli's abilities, and the buff duration from Marilina Guardian. Prime Flow allows for the extended use of Gloom, and Equilibrium allows for energy to be restored by health orbs while Gloom is active. Archon Stretch increases the effective range of Gloom and allows for quick energy regeneration if Gloom is deactivated. Transient Fortitude and Umbral Intensify increase the damage vulnerability multiplier of Sea Snares and the heal from Marilina Guardian. It does not affect the buff potency, unfortunately. Fast Deflection decreases shield recharge delay and increases shield recharge rate for invulnerability window and shield gate abuse, adding another layer of survivability. If Gloom is not your jam, Ophinum Eyes is a wonderful alternative. It is a duration-based ability, however, and requires dismounting Marilina to reactivate. The slow it provides is great, but its biggest asset is the Armor Shred, which is easy to use since it is a line-of-sight based ability. Combined with Marilina Guardian, secondary weapons are ridiculously powerful. Yareli has a lot of arcane options, and while this video will not contain an exhaustive list, it will cover the most common options that are likely to see the most use across all forms of content. The arcanes that Yareli Prime makes the best use of, most of the time, is Arcane Aegis, Arcane Avenger, Arcane Precision, Molt Augmented, and Molt Efficiency. Arcane Aegis is great for increasing Yareli's survivability. As already mentioned, Yareli can use Marilina as an invulnerability gate, so why would we even want to use Aegis? Well, if Yareli's shields go down, she has a shield gate timer of about 1.5 seconds. During this time, it's best to cast Marilina for the 4-second invulnerability window to stay alive. However, Yareli's shields will only regen at the tail end of the invulnerability window, ultimately leaving her with a 0.33 second shield gate. Arcane Aegis recharges shields to full in about 2.85 seconds, allowing her to refresh her shield gate within the Marilina invulnerability window. For level cap Void Cascade, this is a great option for survivability. Arcane Avenger is an excellent option for increasing outgoing damage for all weapons, especially secondaries since they are affected by Yareli's passive. Yareli is squishy in the conventional sense, but can abuse Marilina's invulnerability timer to stay alive. This allows her to abuse the absolute hell out of this arcane and make low crit chance weapons shine. For Giga Chat secondary damage, Arcane Precision is a great option. Upon a headshot with any weapon, Yareli gains plus 300% damage with her secondary weapon. Combined with her passive, she can shred most enemies with her secondary weapon alone. However, if you combine the damage vulnerability bonuses of Sea Snares and Loyal Marilina, there's almost nothing that can survive a mag dump. Molt Augmented is such a staple of the channel that it's laughable. However, for Yareli Prime, it's a great option, if not something to default to on most builds. The ability strength increase affects Sea Snare's damage vulnerability for both Yareli's cast and Marilina's, Ogle Blade's damage, and the potency of various helmet abilities. Most builds do just fine with the mods alone, but for scaling purposes and extra insurance and level cap content, Molt Augmented is a go-to pick. Lastly, we have Molt Efficiency. This arcane extends Sea Snare uptime, extends Ogle Blades for easier management of Surging Blade setups, and if you're running Roar or Gloom as your helmet, the duration bump makes energy upkeep way less punishing. Yareli already plays evasively, especially on Marilina, regardless of whether you're using Loyal Marilina, so keeping shields up isn't that hard, and once Molt Efficiency kicks in, it smooths out the whole rotation. It's not a mandatory arcane, but for duration focused builds or players who like that consistent set it and forget it rhythm, it's a fantastic quality of life arcane. While there is no best arcane combo on Yareli Prime, I prefer to run Arcane Aegis and Molt Augmented on most of my setups by default. Aegis provides a substantial boost to survivability in tougher content, which is where I spend most of my time. Molt Augmented improves the potency of Sea Snare's damage to vulnerability debuff and the equipped helmet ability. While not listed, other weapon-specific arcanes like those for primaries, shotguns, and melees are also extremely good. They were left out of the list simply due to Yareli's focus on secondary weapons due to her passive and her inability to use other weapons while riding Marilina. For those other weapon types, you would have to use Loyal Marilina. For endgame content, I recommend using Madurai as the primary focus school. Power Transfer is great on Yareli Prime for smoothing out the casting animations of key helmet abilities like Roar or Gloom, but it also makes Sea Snares and Riptide feel much snappier. Since Yareli is vulnerable during casting and often weaving between ability cast and weapon usage, the 50% casting speed helps her keep up her momentum and reduces the risk of getting interrupted mid-animation. Sling Strength is a major boost to Yareli's overall kit. It gives a 40% ability strength buff after 2 Void Slings, which directly benefits Sea Snare's vulnerability debuff, Riptide's burst damage, and Ogle Blades' damage, especially if using Surging Blades. If you're also using Roar or any other damage boosting helmet, Sling Strength helps you hit damage breakpoints faster and keep up the pressure in Steel Path or Endurance content. Void Strike and Void Fuel don't tie directly to Yareli's abilities, but they are perfect for weapon-focused setups. With her tendency to use primer weapons like Epitaph or Compressive Prime, or heavy-hitting melee weapons, Void Strike's massive weapon damage buff gives her reliable backup nukes when energy is tight or when you need to burst down Xmas units. Void Fuel helps keep your ammo economy in check during those power windows and is especially useful when using Marilina Guardian. Phoenix Talons adds a flat 30% bonus to physical damage, which supports slash-focused melee weapons and any gun with decent physical weight. It's a nice passive bonus that complements Yareli's kit without needing any setup. While her abilities will do the heavy lifting, Phoenix Talents does round out her weapon game and accelerates kill time on tougher enemies, especially in endurance content. As for the Archon shards, this is what I run for general content. The Tauforge Emerald shard increases the maximum stacks of corrosive procs on an enemy by 3, drastically increasing the damage against armored targets if corrosive projection or a defense stripping ability is not in the picture. If you prefer to use something else, you can use a Crimson shard for the stat of your choice. The 3 Tauforge Crimson shards are split between 15% ability duration and plus 30% ability strength. The duration boost is a nice quality of life bit and puts every build into the net positive. The ability strength further increases the multiplicative scaling of sea snares if using Loyal Marilena. The final shard is a Tauforge Violet meant to be a mini equilibrium. I found it to help keep abilities active and easier for spamming. Not all of the builds are friendly to Yareli's energy pool, so it keeps everything in order. To round things out, let's dive into Yareli Prime's weapon loadouts. Yareli Prime is a pseudo-weapon platform, but with a twist. Her ability to apply multiplicative damage vulnerability means that nearly any weapon in her hands can hit like a truck. This opens the door to a wide range of options. For primaries, I suggest using the Cedo Prime and Coda Base Assist. Cedo Prime naturally excels in status spreading and AoE damage, which pairs beautifully with Yareli's Sea Snares since they hold enemies nice and still. The modded viral or corrosive procs from the glaive projectile stack status quickly, while Sea Snares increase incoming damage dramatically, meaning the subsequent buckshot barrage hits way harder than it normally would. It's ideal for room clearing and even bleeding HVTs to death, which synergizes with her kit without requiring pinpoint aim. The Coda Base Assist is a sleeper powerhouse on Yareli Prime. Its primary fire launches a blast-based projectile with infinite body punch-through, making it excellent for lining up multi-kills in tight spaces. On its own, that's solid, but when combined with Yareli's multiplicative damage to vulnerability from Sea Snares and Loyal Marilena, it becomes devastating. Add in Galvanized Savvy, which has a multiplicative effect to base damage, and you're stacking layers of scaling multipliers. And with a plus 60% valence bonus to boost its already solid base damage, each shot can wipe out clustered enemies even in Steel Path Endurance. The high status chance and synergy with crowd control make this a perfect primary for abusing Yareli's kit to its full potential. For secondaries, I like using the Kuva Nucor and Yareli's signature Compressa Prime. The Kuva Nucor is a beam secondary powerhouse, with the highest critical damage multiplier in the game at 5 times. Under Yareli's critical flow, which grants plus 200% crit chance on secondaries after 1.5 seconds of movement, even its low base crit chance of 7% becomes somewhat reliable, turning every beam sick into a serious hit. Add multiplicative damage vulnerability from Sea Snares and Loyal Marilena, and watch as the chain beams punish clustered foes. If properly built out with secondary Enervate, this weapon becomes a truly disgusting piece. Yareli's signature Compressa Prime shines with an innate multi-shot of 4, 36% status chance, and viral explosion bubbles that detonate 2.4 meters around targets. Its high status spread and floaty burst mechanics synergize exceptionally well with the multiplicative vulnerability from Sea Snares and Loyal Marilena, making each bubble a scaling detonator. Plus, with critical flow active, its base 16% crit chance becomes 48%, enabling the weapon to become a hybrid crit weapon. While the gun has been relegated to a primer in the past, with Yareli Prime it can be a serious contender for heavy damage per second. Finally, the melee options are Praetos and Dual Viscus, which is a step away from the other choices I would usually recommend. Praetos, as many of you know, is a movement speed steroid. For those of you who hate riding Marilena, you heathens, Praetos is right up your alley, and works well with Sea Snares. Drifting Grace increases sprint speed and slide stats, and Evolved Ascension increases parkour velocity. Dual Viscus offers movement speed and attack speed steroids upon applying a gas status effect, which is easy to do since it has innate gas damage. The maximum of 5 stacks grants a plus 40% movement speed steroid. Gas damage isn't deadly on its own, but with Sea Snares, some armor strip, and priming, it can clear crowds without a hitch. Throw on melee influence, and you're essentially throwing a toaster in a bathtub for your enemies, and then showering them with fart spray for good measure. And that is it for the video. Yareli Prime might not come with the reputation of some of the flashier Prime frames, but don't let that fool you. She is the real deal. With the right setup, she makes gameplay incredibly engaging and simple. She doesn't need 5 forma just to feel playable, and most definitely does not require a scientific understanding to play well. She just works well regardless of the circumstances and goes with the flow. Can I recommend her? Yes, she's a low investment, high reward Warframe, and her gameplay loop rewards momentum and awareness without demanding a PhD in synergy stacking. Yareli's invulnerability windows are some of the most generous in the game, and are borderline stupid with how easy they are to activate. Newer players will be able to appreciate this a lot, and can bring her to sorties with confidence, while veterans will probably just stare at the aquaskater girl's skirt or something while getting shot at. All things considered, Yareli's damage amplification and damage mitigation is something most frames envy, and is amazing for all players. Now, Now, I know I just heaped a lot of praise on her, but it's worth mentioning that she will not do everything for you. You still have to keep moving to get the most out of her, and you should still have somewhat decent weapons. If you can get that stuff ironed out, you're golden. So yes, Yareli Prime is 100% worth it. She's the anime waifu you've dreamt of your whole life, unless you prefer spaghetti westerns and, you know, like Mesa Prime. Either way, you're a person of exquisite culture. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, leave them in the comments. As always, thank you all for watching, and happy farming. Stay safe.